to people who have also suffered the consequences of this war, and you will see that there still is a constituency for peace. Robbie Damlin lost her son David to a Palestinian sniper while he served in the Israeli army. And Bassam Aramin lost his daughter Abia when she was 10 years old, shot with a rubber bullet by Israeli border police. And yet, they have rejected revenge, and they have chosen instead to join in spreading the message that enemies must talk to each other, or else, as we see, the cycle of violence will continue. And they both belong to the Parents Circle Families Forum, which is a peace organization for Israeli and Palestinian families who've lost loved ones in this conflict. So welcome both of you to the program. I obviously have to ask you both, as people who believe in peace and peace activists, what you both make of this massive escalation that we're reporting on and that we've seen. Robbie, what do you make of this?
It's so heartbreaking because it's a cycle of violence that leads absolutely nowhere. So there will be a ceasefire in a couple of days, and we have destroyed so many buildings in Gaza, and children in Sderot are wetting their beds at the age of 10, and mothers in Gaza have nowhere to run to a shelter. And a mother in Sderot might have 15 seconds to get to her shelter, and she has 3 children and one in a wheelchair. Who should she choose? So what is this all for? What is this going to bring? We have to recognize that the cycle of violence must stop at some point. I know that when the soldiers came to tell me that David had been killed, he was in the reserves. The first thing I said is, you may not kill anybody in the name of my child. And if I can do anything on this wonderful program of yours, it's to ask mothers, keep your children inside tomorrow morning at the funerals. Don't let them go out and throw stones. They don't understand what they leave behind. They don't understand the pain that is caused by their loss, and they think they're invincible. And so I'm sitting here in my safe room in Jaffa, and I'm looking around me and I realize there'll be a ceasefire. But I also realize that we are faced with a huge problem now internally, which can't be solved by a ceasefire. It has to be solved by a completely different method, by a different way of working with children and educating, by giving hope to young men. Because if you look at who is involved in all of this clash that's going on inside of Israel, it's young kids aged 16 to 20. And it's the settler children who feel that they are allowed to do whatever they like and not get punished. And so this is so difficult.
Then let me ask.
So breaking.
Yeah, I'm going to get back to you in a second, but I want to ask Bassam as well, because as you said, you're in Jaffa, the port city in Israel. Bassam, you're in Jericho, much closer to the Jordan River on the occupied West Bank. You've seen this spread. You have also lost a child, just as Robbie has child, during the height of the last round of conflict. Can you see, as a peace activist, a way back to some kind of political discussions?
Just first, I want to say, for 1 hour, we lost, my neighbor, he's 23 years old, in the junction of Jericho. He come back from his car as a curiosity. A few seconds, he got a bullet in his chest, and he died. It's very sad. I just want to answer this question by saying that the Palestinians didn't kill 6 million Israelis, and the Israelis didn't kill 6 million Palestinians yet. And there is a German ambassador in Tel Aviv, and there is an Israeli ambassador in Berlin. Just we need some brave leader who look forward and not to keep us stuck in the very painful past, to keep the people as two bereaved people, two bereaved victims. The Israelis claim that they are the biggest victim in history. We claim that we are the victim of the victim, and this circle going on more than 100 years. We are trying to kill each other, to defeat each other, and what's the result? More blood, more pain, more victims, and we will arrive to the same result. The Palestinians must be free, even if it's continue for 3,000 years. So we claim we know the result in advance. We need to talk.
So Bassam, I'm really interested because you were 12 years old when you started to resist the occupation. By 17 years old, you had been arrested and sentenced to a 7-year jail term. And yet, as we know, jail can radicalize so many people. But it had an opposite effect on you. You learnt about the Holocaust. You learnt about Hebrew. You, I believe, befriended one of your guards. Tell me the process you went through and what you learned.
You know, it's a matter of values. It's very important to keep your moral values. Even if you are going to kill, you think you are a moral person. In our case, you cannot blame a victim how to fight. I found myself grow up under strange occupation, people that you don't know, you don't understand their language. So you resist them. It's not to create a great Palestinian state. We don't understand that. We want to be safe as kids. And for that, I talk about the new generations who have no attached to something called fear. They want to live free. They don't care about Israel. They don't care about America. They don't care about the rest of the world. They want to be free and be safe. And this is the point. So it was, as you said, jail just radicalized. You become more determined to continue your struggle. But we are human beings. When you discover the humanity of your enemy, is not your enemy anymore. But it's a longer process. It doesn't say to put the Palestinians in jail, they will become humans. And to bring the Israeli army to India, they will become Martin Luther King. But we need to understand that we need to respect each other. We have the right to exist. As long as the occupation continues, as I said, we will continue to fight each other. It's very normal. So unfortunately, it's not up to the Palestinians and the Israelis also. We connect with the other great countries in the world who use us.
And Robbie, you also, you know, we said you lost your son to a Palestinian sniper in 2002. Your son, you say, was a gifted musician. He was interested in philosophy and psychology. He did join the reserves. He wasn't comfortable patrolling or being on duty in the occupied territories, but he did go there, and he ended up losing his life. Tell me the story, but also that you do not have revenge in your heart, but the opposite.
I don't know. You know, when David was called to serve in the occupied territories, he came to talk to me. And he said, I don't know what to do, because if I don't go, what will happen to my students? He was teaching philosophy to kids who were going to be inducted into the army. And if I don't go, what will happen to my soldiers? Because he was the officer. And if I do go, I will treat people with dignity, and so will all my soldiers. And so you see, we don't know who the person is behind the gun. David had signed the paper to say, with all the officers, that he wouldn't serve in the occupied territories. And here he was in this dilemma. I think very much that my South African background had a lot of influence on what happened to me when I heard that David had been killed. And I knew from the beginning, just as Bassam says, that one Palestinian killed my child, not the whole nation. And by the way, he didn't kill David because he was David. If he had known him, he could never have done so. He killed him because he was wearing a uniform in an occupied territory. That's hard to say, but that's the truth. And I believe with all my heart that if we do not find a framework for reconciliation to be an integral part of any political future agreement, all we will have is a ceasefire until the next time. And that is the work that we do in the Parent Circle. And in fact, what happened after David was killed, I was giving a talk at the American Embassy in Tel Aviv, and a Palestinian came to talk to me. And he said, I just want to tell you that the day before your son was killed, I drove through the checkpoint and he came to the car and he said, I have to look at your papers. I promise you, I'll do it as fast as possible. And they had a long conversation. And he said, the next day when I heard your son was killed, I was so sorry. You see, he saw the humanity in each other. And that is the essence of all the work that we do in the Parent Circle. is this allowing a person to talk, and it doesn't matter if you don't agree, but you can have empathy. And let me tell you that there are so many thousands and thousands and thousands of families all over the world now who have lost. And if they would harness that pain to make a difference in their communities, it would give them a reason to get out of bed in the morning, because that's what keeps me going for so many years of slogging it out and never giving up. And we cannot give up. I look into my children and my grandchildren's eyes, and I know that this is what I have to do.
And you even wrote to the parents of the sniper who killed your son and explained this to them. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in a moment, but I want to ask Bassam then the same, because, you know, a couple of years after, or about 5 years after Robbie lost her son, your 10-year-old daughter was killed, I believe by a rubber bullet, I believe by a Israeli border police there. How did you deal with that? How did that challenge your desire to be still on the side of the peace camp?
In fact, 2 years before this tragedy, I was a co-founder of a group, Combatants for Peace, which is a occupation, in fact, with fighters, or and we I'm
going to come back to you, Bassam, once we get your audio. We've got some bad technical issues, but we're going to get your audio back. Robbie, let me ask you why you decided to write to the killers, the parents of the man who killed your son. And have you heard back from them? What were you trying to say to them?
Look, I knew, when I didn't know who had killed David, I was very busy running around the world talking about peace and reconciliation. And I thought I was really very, very, very important. I spoke in Congress and in the House of Lords, and you name it. And one night I was sitting at my desk and there was a knock on my door and there were 3 soldiers outside. And when I opened the door and I saw 3 soldiers, I slammed it in their face. And I said, I cannot lose another child. And then I opened the door and they said, we've come to tell you that we caught the man who killed David. And that was when it became almost impossible. How could I do this work in integrity if I wasn't willing to walk the talk? And so it took me months, and eventually I wrote a letter to the parents of Thaya. That's the name of the man who killed David. I told them all about David. I told them about the parents' circle, that we are more than 600 families who have dedicated our lives now and have gone through transformation and want to see reconciliation and save our other children, and that we should meet. We owed it to each other. That probably is my South African background. Well, it took something like 3 years till I got an answer, and he told me that I was crazy and that I should stay away from his family. And then we went to South Africa to make a film about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and to see what lessons we could learn for Israel and Palestine. And for me personally, this was a trip to investigate what I mean when I say that I forgive. And I met this extraordinary woman there who had lost her daughter. She was white and Afrikaans, and you could give her a label and say that she was pro-apartheid. But she had gone to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and she said to the people who killed her daughter, I forgive you. And I wanted to know what she meant. And I went to meet her, and she said, forgiving is giving up your just right to revenge. And then I met the man who sent the people to kill her daughter. And he said, by her forgiving me, she has released me from the prison of my inhumanity. And then I came back, and this is a very long story, and I wanted to meet the sniper, and I got permission from Tzipi Livni, who was then the Minister of Justice. But then we had elections. You may have noticed that we had rather a lot of elections. And I couldn't do that.
Yeah,
but it's waiting.
I think we have, it's a really profound story, Robbie, just listening to the both of you speak. It's almost like we're on a different planet when we see what the what's happening on the ground right now. So we have Bassam's audio back, and I just want to ask you just a final question to comment. You've written, Bassam, that it was one Israeli soldier who shot my daughter, but it was 100 former Israeli soldiers who built a garden in her name at the school where she was murdered. Do you still have hope? And what would you say to your own leadership and to the Israeli leadership, if you could, right now?
It's not a matter of hope, Christine. It's a matter of faith. We are not going to live under this occupation forever. We are not going to kill each other forever. And we are going with a life, like the life circle of history. So I believe in one day we will have peace agreement. We will live in peace. We are not going to disappear. We are not going we forget to die, in fact. So we will exist, both of us, but how much blood we need. And you can imagine that I'm afraid that history will repeat itself when I see and hear about red marks on the Palestinian houses inside Israel, which very scary remind me with the 30s in the last century. To see Gaza, it's unbelievable. It's remind me with the two towers in New York, September 11, against civilians, and the fear on the other side. We cannot live a normal life in these circumstances because, again, it's very simple. The occupation is the source of this terrorism and madness in both sides. If there is no occupation, we don't need to kill each other. We don't need to fight each other. So I say to our leaders,
we appreciate.
In fact, I want to tell you,
we
the
appreciate
Americans,
the message.
One sentence. We cannot breathe, please.
Yes, that is the George Floyd line, isn't it? Bassam Aramin, Robbie, thank you so much. Robbie Damlin, thank you both so much from Israel and from the occupied territories to talk to us about peace today and about basic humanity.